Your audience has moved on. Let me get into this with you. I'm Serena. This is Serena's Playbook, the place for businesses and brands to level up your strategic thinking. Now, your audience is absolutely not where they were 5 years ago. They are reading, they're researching, not saying anyone else wasn't reading or researching, but they are doing it in such volume and at such pace. They're reading, they're researching, they're comparing what you say in your campaigns, in your communications, to what you actually do in action, in your supply chains, in your product delivery. And they now know the difference between a brand that actually understands its market and a brand that has just learned buzzwords and essentially just hoping that people haven't noticed that it's just buzzwords, it's just lip service. And they are noticing they can also compare you to others within your area. So this is not about cancel culture. Absolutely not. This is also not about walking on eggshells. Let's not insult the intelligence of our audience. This is about something so much more fundamental, the relationship between language and trust. How you communicate. When a brand uses outdated, lazy, or unreflective language, audiences don't just cringe. They'll make a decision and whether this brand, whew, they'll make a decision about whether this brand actually understands the world that they live in, the world that they might even be frustrated with, about whether this brand has actually done the work, about whether this brand is worth their money, their attention, and their loyalty. Language is always a signal, which is why I'm here speaking so much about communications, and audiences are paying attention to the language you use. So let's take something as seemingly small as the phrase third world. It's still in briefs, it's still in pitch decks, it still comes out of the mouths of people who should absolutely know better. So, what does that phrase actually communicate? That there is a hierarchy of human civilization with some at the top and some at the bottom. And the bottom is defined by what it lacks rather than what has been taken from it because your audience knows. And if you don't know this, then you're really missing something here. Using this kind of phrase, these kinds of descriptions, it embeds a worldview. And audiences, particularly younger ones, who are globally connected audiences, who have done the reading and the scrolling, they recognize that worldview. They recognize, this is a very limited worldview. They'll call you a boomer and they'll associate that with your brand. And this is definitely not a niche concern. This is about your mainstream reputation. It's a reputational risk. So, what does evolving your language actually require then? Well, it requires honesty about your current language and where it came from. A lot of the vocabulary that is used was essentially inherited. It's inherited from industries, from agencies, from decades of copy, and nobody questioned because the audience wasn't questioning it either. But that era is over. Now, what requires what is required of brands and what is required of businesses is to genuinely understand. You can't just swap third world for developing nations either without actually interrogating the assumption underneath all of that. Audiences can see that swap as well. So what audiences are looking at is they're looking for evidence that the thinking has changed, that your thinking has changed. So it requires ongoing attention. Language will shift, the context will shift. What was acceptable industry shorthand 5 years ago or even 10 years ago may be doing real damage to your brand right now and to your brand positioning. And this is not a one-time audit. It is a practice that you need to repeat. Your audience is so much more conscious. It is so much more connected. And it's more critical than any previous generation of consumers. My goodness me. Not only are they consuming, they are actively commentating. Your audience are not waiting for brands to reach out. they're, they're also not waiting for brands to catch up, right? Out of loyalty. They are simply moving towards the brand that gets it, towards a celebrity that gets it, towards the public figure that gets it. So the question will be, therefore, whether it is yours that they gravitate to or gravitate away from, whilst also damaging your brand, whilst questioning your legitimacy, your sincerity. Now, what I would always advise is to look at the political spectrum of opinion. You have generations who are older who are voting based on values that aren't necessarily workable now. And those generations may not even be your audience anymore. So, have you made that change? When you look at a younger voter, you know that they are interested in very different things. In fact, their lifestyles have changed. In fact, we can already see there's a shift from wanting to be famous to just wanting a meaningful life and being able to afford things. Not only is your audience changing, but their worldview, their desires, and their realities are changing permanently. Have you caught up? Has your brand caught up? Has your brand vocabulary caught up? It's so interesting. I use that phrase brand vocabulary because in 2015, 2016, I actually had a business, which was effectively what I do now, but I had called it brand vocabulary because it really was about improving, elevating, leveling up the way you communicate with your audiences. And I'm still doing that work. I've been doing that work for 25 years. I'm now a chartered public relations practitioner. I'm also a systems thinker. And with all of this, what I do is I challenge the way that we are taught, trained, and also the way that we encourage brands and businesses to show up in the world. It's really important that we bring in and not isolate these relevant parts of our ecosystem and our world. You can't cut off the politics because that is essentially why I've been so vocal, well, not vocal, but transparent about my politics, where I sit. I have an entire channel dedicated to it, to my political commentary. I also have a personal channel where I talk about my personal beliefs and values. And so your audience are looking for businesses, they're looking for brands, they're looking for public figures, for creators who are transparent, who are showing that they get it, so they can relate to them. This isn't just about being authentic, authentically ignorant. No, it's about showing and demonstrating that you are seeing the world through the lens that your audience has. And that you've got to admit if your worldview is vastly different from your audiences, and that perhaps you haven't caught up. And it shows in your communications. Perhaps you're relying on that younger intern or that more conscious communicator in your team who gets it. But then your words and how you speak and how you show up in those meetings, on on those calls or in the boardroom, really reveals how limited your worldview is and how you really don't get it and how you're really not in the hearts and the minds of your customer and your audience. So I challenge you, I really challenge you to do some audience segmentation work. I challenge you to look at your audience segments and to ask yourself, where do they all sit? On the political spectrum, what do they care about right now? If there is a conflict going on right now at the time that you're watching this, ask yourself, where do they sit? in terms of opinion on this conflict? Ask yourself that question. Use these prompts to get a deeper understanding of your audience so that your brand does not get shooed off. This is not about cancellation culture. This is about them shifting their attention elsewhere and you're trying to retain it. It's been wonderful to have you here. Please do all those wonderful things. Jump in the comments, like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.